Hey, welcome back to Chivo Garage. In this one, we're back with the P38 Range Rover again, and we're going to be looking at the cruise control system. So when I first got the car, the cruise control didn't work at all. I've done a little bit to it, and it kind of almost works every now and again. So from what I've read, it's very common to have vacuum leaks on it. The first port of call, get the bonnet up, and you'll see here on the vacuum throttle there, just on the left hand side, if you're in the car, rear of the engine bay, you have these vacuum lines. Now there's a T-piece there, and there were two lines there, and these were completely just falling apart and crumbling with me, so I replaced those and the system started to get a bit better. Now what I've also heard is there's another line here that goes from here around the bulkhead and into the back of the brake pedal area. So we're going to have a look at that next, and hopefully that's the last of the lines that are showing any issues whatsoever. So that means we've got to get in the passenger compartment and the driver's side and start a bit of work there. So here we are, just on the driver's side inside the car, and I think we need to remove this sort of kick panel here to gain access to the back of the brake pedal. Now we have a screw there, screw there, and then under these caps are a bunch of screws as well. Oh, can't do that with my fingernail. And there's one with the cap already off. So I'll start whipping those off and get back to you in a sec. So with all the screws off, this panel then just drops out like that, and that air hose just pops off, and this screw clip falls off from something that's obviously broken in here somewhere. It looks like those top screws have been butchered a bit in the past and have suffered. So there we go, not the end of the world, but just another example of the hard life this has had, and obviously this has been off in the past. So put that somewhere and let's have a look at what's going on. The next thing is to just remove this plastic trim piece here. Now again, it looks like this has been out in the past. I'm guessing it had a number of these types of fastenings, so I'm just going to work that out and try and pop it out somehow. So on the back of that panel, it was just a few trim clips and then it became loose. One there, one there, one there, and one there on mine. And then the only other thing to be aware of is this here that appears to be a footwell lamp, and I can just unclip there. So I'll pop that off and then see what else we got. So after a bit of digging, I found that vacuum hose. So if you take the brake pedal, we remove this cover here, and then above that, just there, is the vacuum hose. This is really hard to do holding it. See if I get my finger in there to point. So there, just where those orange wires go, is it? Yeah, orange, brown, red and orange is the hose there. Apologies for the bad focus there, and it's difficult to see. If you just come out a little bit, there is a heater duct here, and all I've done is I've just put a bit of pressure on the top of it, popped it out a little bit, and that's given me the access to that hose. Now at first inspection that hose looks okay, but I've bought some replacement, so I'm going to whip that off, replace it and see how we get on. Right, so we've now popped the hose off the back of that switch, and by the way, never knock the switch out. It's kind of precariously held in there by a couple of clips, and it's a pain. I had to push and pull the heater ducting just that bit more to clip it all back in. That's why the wiring connector's off. So anyway, that's released the hose, which you can sort of see dangling there, and that goes and feeds up towards the bulkhead. I think you can maybe just about see that. So now we'll go into the engine bay, I'll show you the other end. So the other end of that hose comes through the bulkhead, just there. I don't know if you can see that clearly. Let's see if a bit of torch helps. Just around there. So I'm going to pull that out and then replace it with a new hose. So I'll start working that and get back to you in a few, and it just works across the back of the engine bay there along that bulkhead. So if I get a hand in, oops, you can, it's really tight. So you can see there, it's that hose just there. And that'll work all the way across the back of the engine and out of the other side, back to that cruise vacuum thingy there. Right, I'll start pulling that out, feed it along, and see what we get. And one thing to note here, as I was doing this earlier, just to check I had the right hose, found a large crack just there. So that's probably why the cruise would work a little bit and then stop and then work a little bit more. So there we go, just work this across, catch you in a few. So that's the old hose just dragged out of there all the way along, and yes, I could have tied the new one to it and saved myself a few minutes, but hey, why make things easy on yourself? So now I'm going to introduce the new hose, which is this blue because they'd ran out of black silicone, diameter 6mm internal, and I'm just going to start feeding it through. So after a fiddly start, that's the new blue hose fed through the bulkhead, along the back of the engine there, and back out to that actuator. Now I've not plumbed it in properly yet, I've just pulled it through. Now I'm going to go back into the cockpit, hook it up to the switch, and then tidy everything up. So here we are back in the cockpit, and I can see that blue hose has now worked its way through nicely and dropped down there. So I'm just going to attach that to the switch there after I've plugged the connector back in. So there we go, that's the hose back onto the back of the switch. A nice gentle run out there, and now I'll go back into the engine bay, tidy that up, and tidy up this ducting. So there we go, that's the hose run across the back of the engine bay. Just going to remove this last old piece of hose. Oh, that was stubborn. And now just measure up the new piece. Leave a little bit of slack just to help me out if I need it. There we go. Feels like a decent length. Snip there and drop it on. There we go. That's the vacuum lines replaced, and they are the main culprit for faults on the old cruise control. Now I'm just going to button up that dashboard, take it for a spin, see if we fixed it. And now we're just buttoning everything up. That's the dash back together nicely, engine bay's all sorted. Just before the test run, you can now see where that damage was in that hose. So it wasn't as obvious as it could have been. Right, let's check if it worked. Right, so little road test. There's cruise control on, about 40 miles an hour. Press the set button. There we go.
Foot off.
Cruise control working. Lovely little fix. So cheers, catch you next one.